So the other day, I was looking through some of my old gaming magazines from back in the day, just trying to get an idea for like a new video. And I reached the actual tips and tricks and like code section of a magazine, which used to be cool. It would actually give you the codes that you wanted and help sell magazines. And I saw an article about NBA Showtime for the Dreamcast. Now, I wasn't really into NBA Showtime, but it got me thinking like, you know what game I really liked? NBA Hangtime, which was part of that like NBA Jam series. It was the third NBA Jam type of game back then. And it was a game that I got for my Genesis and I absolutely loved. But then I also know that most of the media and most of the hype has always been NBA Jam, not NBA Hangtime or NBA Showtime for that matter. But NBA Jam, in my opinion, is not a good game when compared to NBA Hangtime. Let's talk about
He jams it in.
So if you're new to my channel, definitely consider subscribing. I like to talk about nostalgic games and games that come back to life after many years. So in this video, we're going to talk about the NBA Jam versus NBA Hangtime comparison and why I think NBA Hangtime is a much better game than NBA Jam. Now, NBA Jam, if you don't know, was an arcade-style basketball game released in the early 90s. It had digitized characters that were all really digitized characters from the NBA. They used their faces for the most part. They didn't really have NBA players participating in that besides using their likeness, but they did a digitized representation of quick 2-on-2 pickup games but using NBA courts and NBA characters with their franchise brands. That game was fun because it had over the top dunks. It had great gameplay. It was very quick, easy to play, and it was broken up into a quick basketball game that you can actually make a lot of money in if you have an arcade machine that has that game, because of course each quarter costs you a quarter or a credit, and then you would just play like that. And it was an instant hit because it was quick, it was easy to pick up, and it was just over exaggeratingly fun when sports games before that were really simulation based and they weren't like arcade fun based. So this was a really nice hit to play off of. And when it came to the 90s, basketball was huge. NBA Jam was, of course, an arcade game that was converted to the 16-bit consoles, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. I played the Sega Genesis version, but the Super Nintendo version was not much different. They had their differences, but I played the Sega Genesis version. And the Genesis version did a pretty okay conversion of the arcade. It wasn't spectacular. Obviously, the graphics were reduced a bit, but it was still fun, pick up and play. But then after a while, especially for arcade simulations, you don't play them for too long. You play them just as long as you'd play the arcade, and then after you get your fill, no deep storyline, nothing. Pretty cool codes, but then you're done. But I never owned NBA Jam. It was kind of more of a go over a friend's house and play type of game. So that's my experience with NBA Jam and even Tournament Edition, and I think they did a very good job converting those games. But after a while, I kind of moved on from the franchise and looking into 3D games, wanting into experiment in that space and upgrade my hardware, though I didn't upgrade to a 32-bit system until the late 90s, so that was something. When newer systems were coming out like PlayStation and Nintendo 64 and the Saturn, one of the earliest games for Nintendo 64 was NBA Hangtime. Now, this was a game that was in the NBA Jam series, but I had never really seen NBA Hangtime in the arcades because at that point I wasn't visiting arcades as much as I was in the early 90s. And NBA Hangtime looked really cool and played really well. It had several upgrades. It had the fact that you could do double dunks. It had the announcer changed a little bit, but it had like team fire mode, so it was like both characters could actually be on fire at the same time. All of this stuff was pretty cool, but it was on the Nintendo 64, and I only had a Sega Genesis. So when I played it over a friend's house, I thought that was like, it brought me back into the NBA Jam hype, but I went back to Genesis, of course. I eventually found that they actually did sell NBA Hangtime for the Sega Genesis in '96, and I picked it up right away because I actually loved the gameplay in NBA Hangtime. It got me excited again, whereas NBA Jam was a bit repetitive for me. Now, playing NBA Hangtime is a very stark difference from NBA Jam. The graphics are nuts. They're improved heavily when compared to NBA Jam. The characters are larger, more detailed. The courts are more detailed. You have also extra courts, so it wasn't just NBA courts, but you could also play in a rooftop court, and you can play in what looks like a beachside court, which was pretty awesome as well. You can create your own character. You could actually save your progress with your own name rather than using just 3 characters. You could actually write in a longer name. And I found that when I popped it in my Genesis when playing right now, just for this review, that my old Genesis cartridge still had my save data from in the 90s with my insane record, and I was pretty good when I played it. So there's a lot of nostalgia in there that I was able to relive actually for this review and show you guys. So I played this game a lot. NBA Hangtime is a Genesis game that I have a nostalgic preference for when compared to NBA Jam, but it's all of these modes that made me want to play it so much. It has a ton of secret characters like NBA Jam did, but also the graphics, the presentation, the different chords actually added variety that was missing in NBA Jam and made me think, wow, this is so much better. Plus the gameplay with the double dunks or the alley-oops, insane. One thing that I could definitely compare between both NBA Jam and NBA Hangtime, Tournament Edition I'm kind of lumping in with NBA Jam because they're mostly similar. But the difference that actually showed me that NBA Jam had a little bit of an advantage was that NBA Jam's sound was, in my opinion, much better than NBA Hangtime. The way the basketball dribble sounds, the way that the announcer sounds, even though it's a Genesis and it's a bit muffled in both versions, that actual announcer in NBA Jam, I think, brings a lot more energy and a lot more smiles to the gameplay versus the NBA Hangtime announcer, who was just more or less announcing what you were doing on the Genesis version.
Why? Wild shot. He shoots. Wish. Raises up. Oh my! Jams it in.
But it was still no disrespect to the NBA Hangtime announcer, but NBA Jam announcer was king of the hill.
Yeah.
But that's why they brought back that original announcer when they did an upgraded NBA Jam for modern consoles.
The only thing better than a dunk is a block dunk! Oh, man! This'll be a 2.
So I think, to be honest, the reason why NBA Hangtime didn't do as well or isn't as popular as NBA Jam is because NBA Jam and NBA Jam Tournament Edition, for the most part, were original ideas. It had that original announcer, and it was just at a time where sprite gaming was taking off. There wasn't really much hype for like 3D gaming. The graphics themselves were pretty cool, but it was mostly about gameplay and digitized characters, because that was at that time in the early 90s was actually pretty popular because of franchises like Mortal Kombat, which Midway themselves were the ones who actually released that. So that excitement was pretty big, and NBA Jam took advantage of it and ran with the ball. By the time NBA Hangtime came out, which NBA Hangtime did use digitized graphics, but they were much bigger and much more livelier presentation, and the gameplay was improved so much. But at that point in the 90s, we no longer were worried about digitized characters or anything like that. We were more looking into the prospect of 3D games. And another basketball sim of NBA Jam, which wasn't a sim, it was like an arcade style, was kind of like done already. So NBA Hangtime came out in this unfortunate position of where we were transitioning and upgrading our consoles, but the graphics style too. We were more concerned with 3D games than we were with 2D based games, and NBA Hangtime kind of fell in that little hole where you didn't want to be in that section of game releases. But the fact that it came out for the Genesis was one of my last Genesis games that really showed me that the Genesis had pretty good power and what you can do with it when you actually use it right. Because imagine a game like NBA Hangtime came out in the early 90s when NBA Jam was relevant, and instead you got NBA Jam but looking like NBA Hangtime, maybe playing like NBA Hangtime. Everyone would have said, man, the Genesis version looks so much better than the Super Nintendo version if it came out on Genesis exclusively. But needless to say, the Genesis and the Super Nintendo were able to pump out great looking games, better looking games than what we originally thought was possible in the early 90s with games like NBA Jam. So where does the legacy of NBA Hangtime leave us today? Well, again, it's still a nostalgic game for me, as you see it behind me, and I still have the ability to play my old save file on my Genesis, so I'm super happy about that. But the Arcade 1-Up series just released NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and NBA Hangtime in one arcade cabinet, which in my opinion, it's a great opportunity to play this franchise of basketball games and just have a great time with it and see like the upgrade differences between the machines. And of course, use 90s basketball characters, which, to be quite honestly, I think is still one of the best eras of basketball that we've had in all time. That's my personal opinion. But let me know what you guys think of NBA Jam Tournament Edition, or NBA Hangtime. Which did you like best? Did you even get to play NBA Hangtime on the 16-bit consoles, which is an experience all in itself? It's definitely something that, for me, I love because of nostalgic purposes, and it beats out NBA Jam and NBA Jam Tournament Edition. I guess that's part of the point, right? We love what we remember growing up when we were a kid, right? Anyway, if you like this video, want to see more conversations about old games and bringing them into modern times, then hit that subscribe button. I'm looking to do more of these, and I got a couple more game sales episodes that I'm writing that I actually have to film. I keep promising that, but gotta get around to it. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching this video, and of course, you'll make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you later.